We're going to be talking about Python classes and objects. So Python is a we in our previous class we talked about functions and Python scope. So Python is an object-oriented programming languages. So Python actually, based on it being an object-oriented programming languages, so it uses programming language. It's a programming language that uses objects. It makes use of objects and what and classes in performing what its tasks or what anything assigned to it. So this the principle in this OOP is that it allows it allows the developer to be able to create and also manipulate objects. So so when working on a complex program in particular, object-oriented programming lets you to reuse, just like we said, it enables you to manipulate and also create and also what reuse your code. So this is what OOP does for us, and it works mostly with what with class and object. So we'll be talking about what a class is and what an object is. So a class is a blueprint created by a programmer for an object. This defines a set of attributes that will characterize any object that is instantiated from a class. So an object is an instance of a class that this it is the realized version of a class whereby the class is manifested in the what in the program. So this definition I actually give it like an example, like a layman's example of what a class is all about and what an object is all about. Take for instance, you want to make a cookie, right? So in making a cookie, you have a recipe for doing making a cookie. This recipe is not the actual cookie itself, rather it defines how to make a cookie, right? And then you have the cookie itself when after you must have used the ingredients or the recipe for that to make the cookie. So this is how a class and object is. A class has several attributes whereby you can now use to create an object. So we are going to delve into our VS Code to see how we can declare a class and also we can be able to create objects from this class. So I've already created my file called class.py. So I'm going to now come here and pass in a class person. Need to pass in a class. You can choose to call it anything you want. So far you write it in the right syntax. So I have a person capital in capital letter. So I would come here and call a function. So here now, this function does not work on its own, but rather it works as a method of what? Of this class to be able to declare attributes of a class that we can be able to use and reuse and create to get what? To create an object. So we have like in a person now, if you want to create this, you actually say, oh, what does a person, what are the attributes of a person? So some of the attributes of a person is that the person has a description, like the name, the person has a hobby, and lots more. Someone has a height, someone has, and lots more. So I can now, I'll be in this tutorial, I'm going to be using two examples to show us what we are talking about. I'm going to be using description, right? We need to be using description, just like we write our functions, we write the def, then the function name, and then a parenthesis, and then a colon. Then I would then say print. I want to format this guy. So I'm going to be using our F format. In our previous videos, we talked about how to concatenate and how to make our code very like look more readable. So I'm going to say I'm going to pass in this self dot name. I would say is a good girl. Then I'll also create an attribute, call it hobby, def hobby, then pass in a parenthesis, then my semicolon, sorry, my colon rather. Then I'll call, say, print f. Then I would say self dot name, self dot name, then place, then I will say self dot game. So here I've given the attributes, what attributes of what a person, of what a person of what a person does, what of what a person does. So I can I can then now start to create object. So how do I create my object? Before I go about creating this object, once if you look at this, it's giving us an error telling us self is not defined. So I should have to assign self inside this parenthesis. Why? Because self refers to instance, it refers to instance calling. It enables us to access the attributes of this person, a class person. So if we don't put a self there, we can't be able to access this attribute to be able to create our to be able to create our object. So I'm going to now say self, passing self here, and also come here and passing self here too. So are you seeing the error has gone? So we'll be delving to creating our object. First, another thing again that you have to do to create this object, you have to initialize the object. Initializing the object means you have to call back this class. So I'm going to pass in any variable name. I'll say child equals to person, the person class I called. I'm trying to initialize this object by calling this class. So then I will then be able to give some attributes, or I'll be able to say, what does a child do to be able to create a child. I'll say a child does what? I'll say a child has a name, right? Child dot name equal to, I'll say blessing. I'll then come here again and say child dot game equal to, I'll say volleyball, right? I'm going to save this guy. So once, if I run this, I've saved it, right? And then come here, I'll run it. It's not giving me anything because I have not called in, just like a function is a method here. So just like we call our functions, return our, we said we use functions. When we pass in functions, we return it again. So I will now come here and say child dot description. I'll call description, right? Dot description. I pass in my parentheses and then save it. So if I come here and run my code, I'm getting what? Blessing is a good girl. That is how we've now created an object, which is an instance of of this class person. So we're using these attributes of a class to create an object. So I can still come here and say child dot game, child dot hobby, then pass in my parentheses and save it. So it's going to give us what? It's going to give us blessing plays, I'll put an S here, blessing plays what? Plays volleyball. So this is how we create an object. So there are some cases whereby this might be tedious, passing in, like saying child dot name, child dot game, trying to get some attributes of what does a child contain to create this, and there might be a time that you might get an error. Let me say I mistakenly type a double E here, then I want to get this guy. I will comment this guy here, line number 11, and also comment on this line number 13. and then run the code. So we will see that maybe if we fall inside this kind of error, it's going to tell us, oh, because of it being cumbersome, we're trying to get, oh, what does a child have? What does a child have? The attributes to be able to create an object, right? So it's telling us here that person object has no attribute name. So this is where our constructor comes into play. Normally a constructor, normally automatically a constructor is being instantiated when an object is what is initialized. So this, like if you've gone through JavaScript before, you would remember we talked about constructors where we use .this to create new attributes of a particular thing we are performing in a particular task. So here in Python, we also make use of constructors, whereby it still goes with the same syntax of functions, but we will pass an int, underscore underscore int. That is how we pass in our constructors. So then I'm going to uncomment this guy. I'm going to uncomment it, and then I'm going to take away these values I added for my person. So then I will then come here, like we said before, just like we did for the rest, for the other functions. I'll pass in a self. We said a self enables us to access what? Access the attributes of a person class, to be able to a class person, to be able to create an object. So I'm going to now come here too, and then I'll then assign whatever I want to assign parameters. I'll assign variables or parameters to this constructor here. So I want, let me say I want name, I want game 2, and then I want age, right? So I'll be able to now come here and then say, instead of the other way around we did it, I'll then come here. You know, when we talked about assigning parameters, sorry, this guy, remember to put our colon. Then because I have created assigned parameters or variables here, I should be able to create, I have parameters here, so I should be able to construct. You know what we said, constructors, what do? They enable us to construct new to be able to enable us to construct new data that we can use for the attributes in this particular class we are talking about, in this particular class person. So I'll now come here with the syntax self. I'll call the self to be able to access them. Self.name equal to name, right? I'm creating variables now to create new attributes, or to create data for new attributes. So then I'm going to now also say self dot game equal to game. Then I'll say self dot age equal to age. So I have created new attributes, new data to actually get new attributes for the creation of for the creation of my object. So then I will then come here and then pass in, just like we have parameters already assigned here. I have parameters here, and these parameters I have then I've created them, I've constructed them. Then I have to now come into where I initialized my object and pass in assignment. You know, when we have parameters, we have inputs, we assign things to the parameters. So then I call my name and I pass in Joanne. Then I say comma, I pass in basketball, and then comma, and I pass in age for 20, because this is what I have here. So then I can still, if on my own, I can still make other, if I want to create, like I said, if you declare a class, you can create many objects, as many objects as you want. That's why Python Python is what is an object-oriented programming. It enables you to create many, to reuse, and also to manipulate. So I have div now. I now have my age. Let me use my underscore my age. Then I have my parenthesis. I have my colon. Then I say print what? Print I am age, self.age, right? I am self.age years. So this is what I want to say. So don't forget to put our self here, which allows us to access whatever we are doing. So once I now come here and save this guy and come here and run it, are we seeing? I'm going to clear this guy here and open a new terminal. So if I come to for us to be able to get a clarity of what we are doing, so then I have what? Joanne is a good girl, and then I have Joanne plays what? Joanne plays basketball. So if I still want to get for the age, I can say here child dot what? Child dot my age, parenthesis, then save it. So if I come here, right, it's actually going to show me Joanne is a good girl. Joanne plays basketball. I am 20 years old. You can still put Joanne is 20 years old any way you want to form the object. So we can create as many objects as we want. I can still come here and say son. I can say son. I will then initialize it by calling person, then I would then pass in things I want again to be there. I would say John. I'll pass in John inside here. Then I'll say John plays tennis, right? Tennis. And then I'll assign an age, which is 30 for John. Then I would come here and say son dot what? Son dot description, right? Description. I'm trying to create multiple, like we said, we can create multiple objects. You can manipulate them and you can reuse them. I can now say son dot what? Son dot hobby, right? I'm trying to display everything. So I have here son dot what? Son dot my age. So then I save my code, come to my terminal and run it. So are you seeing what we have here? I've created another object. So I have John is, I can actually change the girl here. I can actually say is a good boy because John is actually a male name, right? So I'll say John is a good boy. I'll still run the code here. So it's showing me here that John is a good boy, right? So I can uncomment this guy for me to be able to see just the other one I did, right? So I didn't. Then run the code. Are you seeing? John is a good boy. John plays tennis. I am 30 years old. So this is how we create what? We create an object. So here now we deployed what? We deployed constructors, and constructors are being used to, we now pass in parameters inside the constructor, and then we are able to assign things to the parameters to be able to create what? To be able to create objects in Python.